Uh, but the writer claims he surrounds himself with people who are cognizant of their white privilege. He's saying other liberals, and strive to make the world a less terrifying and frustrating place for people of color. This means that I often deal with said white people asking me about what they can actually do to affect change. So here, anxious allies of the world are 100 simple ways to be the change. It's not nearly as comprehensive as I'd like, but it's somewhere to start. Go forth and disrupt our harmful racist paradigm. That is really creative. So the number one item on the list is just because you can't see racism around you doesn't mean it's not happening. Trust a person of color's assessment of the situation. So what you're basically telling us is let every professional victim on the left play the race card and you can't question it. That's how you can make life less frustrating and scary for a person of color, is when the left plays the race card or calls you a racist, don't question it. Makes sense. Don't assume that all people of color share the same views. We are not a monolith. Last time I checked, identity politics is a Democrat institution. That is a leftist ideology, is identity politics. Like Hillary Clinton joking about always keeping hot sauce while speaking to an all-black crowd in the South. That's racism, and that's assuming that all black people eat hot sauce. Or assuming that they all vote Democrat, like when Joe Biden stood in front of a predominantly African-American crowd and speaking directly to the black people said, white people want to put y'all back in chains. They mean things like that. The next item is don't assume or guess people's race. This is not a fun game for us. I don't know anyone who meets a new person of color and tries to guess their race. I mean, I thought the races were like, you can kind of tell when someone's Hispanic, you can kind of tell when somebody is black, you can kind of tell when they're Asian. I guess he means guess their heritage or ethnicity. I'm not sure. I don't know really how you guess race. You don't really have to guess at it. If someone tells you from Uganda, don't say, I went there once, even if you have. Just please. Last time I checked, people build rapport off of commonality. When they speak, they build rapport off commonality. And if I was in another country and I said, I'm from the United States, I'm from America, and they said, oh, I've been there, I'd want to know where they were from. I'd want to know where they went to, where they visited, what they saw, and I'd love to talk to them about it. And I don't know if that's exclusive to America because we're awesome and our people are great and our country is so incredible, or not. But apparently, this liberal Vice columnist doesn't want people to mingle on points of commonality. And this one is so much fun. Don't refer to Africa as a country. It's a continent. I think most people know that. I don't hear many people calling Africa a country. I've never heard anyone call Africa a country. Number 6, and rest assured that literally no person of color ever wants you to get back from holiday, show your tan, and exclaim, look, I'm almost as dark as you. Cease and desist. I don't know anyone I've never heard that. I don't know very many people who try to tan. I thought that was like a California liberal college girl thing. Don't assume that a person of color knows everything about their country of heritage. Do you know everything there is to know about America, Germany, Sweden? That's what I thought. Well, no, obviously, I don't know everything there is to know about America, but I think I can speak pretty intelligently on the matter. And I think going back to that conversations where people build rapport on commonality, I think they could turn around and have that conversation pretty safely. No, I don't expect somebody from Nigeria to know everything there is to know about Nigeria, but I do have a friend from Trinidad who's a really, really close friend of mine. He's a really good friend of mine. He's family to me. And I've asked him 100,000 times about Trinidad and about what the country is like and what the people are like and how they feel about things. And me and him have that conversation all the time. I think that goes back to building rapport, commonality in conversation, commonality between people, and that's how people bond, is by having conversations on points of commonality. Excuse me. Don't assume that we can run if we're black. do math if we're Asian. Do you notice how this liberal Vice columnist is saying we, like he's one of them? From what I can tell, I scrolled, I found the guy's name, I Googled him. If the pictures I saw are actually of this columnist, he's a white guy. But he's saying we're, because remember, liberals, because they're on the left, they think because they virtue signal and they push all this stuff that they're one of them and that they're cool with them. They think they're down with them. And he's referring to him like he's part of them. Don't assume we're going to run if we're black, or we can do math if we're Asian, or have a drinking problem if we're indigenous. So this liberal white columnist for Vice thinks he's one of them because he's speaking for them. He is speaking for them, telling you how to be less offensive to them, speaking for them. You see, isn't that cute how that works? Regard us as autonomous, unique individuals, not as representatives of our race. Again, identity politics is a leftist institution, not a libertarian or Republican institution. Don't make embarrassing jokes and try to be down with people of color. We'll laugh at you, not with you. Don't rinse our culturally specific memes. They're ours. Go enjoy that weird one about plums. He's reaching there. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't think I've ever seen a culturally specific meme. I don't think that's a thing. I'm just going to start skipping through them here. There's only a few more I want to do, but I want to keep going. Avoid phrases like, but I have a black friend. I can't be racist. You know that's BS as well as I do. No, actually, I don't think it is. I think you're full of it. You cannot hate and disparage somebody of a particular race and then be friends with them, but secretly hate them. That's not racism. I'm sorry, racists don't associate with people of other races. White people who are racist against black people don't associate with black people. They don't like dealing with them. They don't like talking to them. They're racist. They hate them. I'm sorry, just because you want to play the race card every chance that you can, and you told us right in the beginning, trust a person of color's assessment of the situation, you may not see the racism. Just because you want to let them play the race card does not mean that you actually get to. I'm sorry, you're going to get called out on it, and I'm sorry. I have black friends, I actually do. I'm sorry, they will argue with you for me that I'm not a racist. In fact, I can quote my friend from Trinidad as saying I don't have a racist bone in my body in an argument on the internet where I got called a racist by a leftist. While talking, and it was a relevant issue. It was an article about race or something like that. And for my opinion, I got called a racist. And he was on that, messaging in there too, defending me. So no, I'm sorry. You can't have friends of color and be racist. That's just not how it works. You cannot inherently hate somebody. I mean, actually hate them and discriminate against them and be their friend at the same time. That just doesn't work. And also, that person wouldn't be friends with you if you did. So you can't really have white friends and be racist. That's just not how it works. Don't say, and again, Class A Germanist, don't say SHIT like, I know what it's like to be a person of color. I'm a ginger. Who has ever said that? Who has ever heard anyone say that? Message in below and let us know if you've ever heard that, because I've never, ever heard that. Never tell a person of color what is or isn't racist. This goes back right to the beginning, where he said in his article, just because you can't see racism doesn't mean it isn't happening. Trust a person of color's assessment of the situation. This goes right back to it. Him telling you that you as a white person cannot argue that something isn't racist. He's basically telling you if a leftist wants to label you a racist, he gets to label you a racist. If he wants to play the race card, even in an irrelevant situation where the race card doesn't really get to get played, he should get to anyway because he's a person of color. and he gets out there in this article. This article is just great, posted on Vice. I have so much fun on Vice. Actually, most of my 30-day bans from Facebook has been for arguing points on race and transgenderism on Facebook. Most of my 30-day bans have been for that purpose. This is a good one. Don't question someone's blackness if they're light-skinned. It's not your place. Other people can make sure that light-skinned black people are cognizant of their privilege. So you don't even have to actually be white to be white privileged. You just have to not be dark. The leftist columnist here on this Vice article is telling you that the darker you are, the more systematically oppressed you are. That's what they're trying to tell you. That is awesome. When you find instances of racist BS online, please don't send it to us. We know racism exists. Thank you. I didn't know anyone was screenshotting and sending this columnist examples of racism on the internet. The only racism I really ever get to see on the internet, funny enough, comes from the left. It comes from liberals. So we're going to move right on. And we've been talking about race a lot. And I actually kind of have a write-up I did here. We hear about it every day. Every day, everywhere, just racism left and right, we hear about it. And a little while back, an African congresswoman, Representative Sheila Jackson, she's a Democrat from Texas, introduced Bill H.R. 40, which is a slavery reparations bill, and it's a tax fraud scam. It would implement a new tax, so it's a fraud and a scam, and more money being extorted from us. It's in a bill from a Democrat, so it's a fraud and a scam. Every single one of them has been. That implements a new tax to pay black people reparations for slavery. There's an inherent problem here. Slavery ended 164 years ago, and almost no one alive today even has a great-grandparent that endured slavery in America. The most elderly of African Americans alive today might have had a grandparent that was born at the very, very tail end of it. They might even have a great-great-grandparent that was born during it, but most don't. Even today, it's a small percentage, because most Americans today, black or white, are children of legal immigrants. You have to remember that the population was a lot smaller back then, and being a lot smaller, and all the huge influx in the late 1800s, especially through the 1920s, through Ellis Island, through the 30s, all the way up through the 50s and 60s, the huge influx of immigration means that it's actually a very small amount of Americans today actually have ancestral roots back to Americans that lived during the time of slavery, either as slaves or as slave owners. And remember, not everybody from back then was a slave owner. So you very, very well could have ancestral roots all the way back to even before that time period. You could have ancestral roots all the way back to the British colonies, and your relatives weren't slave owners either and didn't support it. So it's a very small percentage, actually, from what I was reading, and I can't find an actual study that's been done. It's probably less than a fifth of Americans from the numbers that I've read. I did not find any conclusive study that told me the actual number, but from the numbers I'm reading, I'm going to estimate it's a fifth or less of Americans actually have ancestral roots that go back that far. Americans, black or white, it doesn't matter. It's a small amount of people that are alive today that actually have roots back then. So the government's proposing this new tax to tax white people. It has to be only white people, because if it's a reparations bill, you can't tax black people too and then give it back to black people for slavery. That's just redistribution, and that's socialism. I wouldn't put it past Sheila Jackson to propose a bill that has socialist elements. She's part of the left. The left today is socialism. It is the party of socialism. They are socialists, and we are in a cold war against socialists right now. So I have to assume, because it wasn't written specifically in there, but I didn't find where it's excluded, where this bill taxes only white people and gives it back to black people for slavery. Now, how do they determine, is it all black people? Because if less than a fifth of Americans actually have ancestral roots back to the time of slavery, that means that the majority of African Americans, about 13% of our population is African American, an even smaller percentage of that, actually had ancestors that were slaves. Nobody alive, I don't know why we're even talking about reparations, though. Nobody alive today owned slaves. Nobody alive today endured slavery. So why should I